So it's mid-August in Finland and the sun's still shining. So what I'm going to call this one is Dismantling Starmer's police state. So I'm just going to go through some practical ideas, some solutions. The first thing to understand, I believe, is that to crack a problem you need to often crack it in sequence. You know, to come up with a solution you need to get your tactics in the right order, and if you enact your solutions in the wrong order, you won't get anywhere. So I don't know, like, I was trying to think of an analogy of this, but maybe it could be a football team or something, and you want to change the way that the team plays, but if you try doing that without first of all changing your squad of players, the tactical change won't work. Or maybe using an historical example, you could think of World War II and the Battle of Britain, and that, you know, the Germans did things in the wrong order, so their overall strategic goal, well, they failed to achieve it. So what I'm saying here is that it's important to get things done in the right order, to tackle things in the right order. So what we've got in Britain at the moment is a lot of people are concerned about migration into Britain, and they're also concerned about certain groups within society failing to integrate. Now, personally, I understand those concerns. But what I'm saying is that if you try to address those concerns directly, you're not going to get anywhere in Britain, because there's a fundamental problem that's going to stop you, which is Britain has hate speech laws. So if you live in a country like Britain where the government has the power to criminalise your speech, your expression, you're not living in a free country. You know, this shouldn't really need to be explained here, but, you know, people say all of this stuff, like this line of free speech comes with responsibilities, and it's the government that decides ultimately what you can and can't say. Well, I'm sorry, you know, if you have a country where the government has that power, by definition you don't have free speech. And what that means is that if you can't talk about a problem, you've got zero chance of being able to solve it. So what I'm saying to Brits is, you need to stop talking about different religious groups. You need to stop talking about the pros and cons of migration, or your criticisms of migration, because it ain't going to get you anywhere at the moment. Yeah. Instead, what you need to do is to start talking about the importance of free speech and campaign for the abolition of hate speech laws, so-called. So I'm old enough to remember when Tony Blair brought in hate speech laws into Britain. I was teaching at the time, and I remember talking to my colleagues about how potentially dangerous this was, because, as I've said before, hate and taking offence at something which, you know, are both criminal, expressing something that can be viewed by somebody else as hate or offensive, that is illegal in the UK. So the problem with that, just to kind of spell it out, is that people can choose to be upset or offended by anything of their choice. It is subjective, which basically means it's a matter of opinion. So if you have somebody with authoritarian tendencies like Starmer, he's going to use those hate speech laws to tighten his authoritarian grip on power. So one more time, the first thing that has to happen in Britain to defeat Starmer's police state is that these hate speech laws need to go. And then after they've gone, well, then an open discussion can take place about migration, about different religious groups within society. But you can't have those debates until the hate speech laws have gone. I'm asking the viewer now of this video do you actually understand that you can't have you can't solve migration, conflicts between different religious groups if you have hate speech laws, if you're going to even criminalize the discussion of those topics. You haven't got a chance of being able to solve them. So the other day on TV they were talking about reforming the education system so that kids will be taught to think critically. Again, there's not a chance of anybody thinking critically in the UK when you have laws that criminalise speech. So when I was teaching at school, there was I used to teach the students 1 hour a week for I think 5 weeks. This was to the lower school, and I would teach them about the arguments in favour of free speech, because you see, I'm what you would call a free speech absolutist. I think that to have a truly free society, all speech must be permitted. You know, the state doesn't have the authority to limit what people can and can't say. So straight off, there's going to be people saying, well, what about things that should people be allowed to say racist things? And my answer to that question is yes, they should be allowed to say racist things. Now, immediately, you're going to have people saying, well, that makes you a racist then, doesn't it? You know, for believing that people should be allowed to say racist things. And I would say, no, that doesn't mean that at all, actually. I might be offended by somebody saying something racist to somebody else, but I believe that they should have the right to say it. I think there's a famous quote by, I think it's Voltaire, who said something to the same effect, that I might disagree with what you've said, but what I do agree with is your right to say it. I also believe that people should be allowed to hire who they want. So, if somebody wants to pursue a racist recruitment policy, well, in a free society, they should be allowed to make that choice. And if they are really being racist, then that business would go bust, because they would be turning away people who would be better at that job and than the people that they're hiring because they've got the right skin colour. The other one that's often used is incitement of violence. That if you say issue of what constitutes an incitement to violence, then that's also a criminal offence. So an incitement to, they often say rioting, or it might be shouting fire in a crowded cinema. That's another kind of classic one that the leftists always bring up. Now, again, what I would say here is that any action basically has creates strengths, positives and negatives, strengths and weaknesses. Now, basically, if you just let this boat go past. Yeah, so basically, it's people saying, I'm gonna do X, Y, Z to you. Do I approve of that? No, I don't. But that doesn't mean that I should want that banned, right? Because what actually does constitute an incitement to violence, something might be said in jest. And then also what John Stuart Mill, Scottish philosopher, said. He believed in this thing called the harm principle. And according to the harm principle, the state has only got a legitimate excuse to intervene in private matters if an action has caused physical harm to either a person or their property. So for example, if you actually hit somebody, or I don't know, stab somebody, then that is grounds for state involvement. You know, that person has committed a crime, and they need to go through some process of justice, preferably a trial by jury. On the same would apply to somebody stealing somebody else's property, you know, breaking into somebody's car or damaging it, or stealing somebody's laptop computer from their house. That breaks the harm principle. There's been damage done to somebody's private property, and according to the harm principle, that is legitimate grounds for the state to take action and do something about it. It's legitimate grounds for the legal system to swing into action. Now, if we think about hate speech, just saying some words doesn't actually cause physical harm. So if somebody's like racist or insulting, no physical harm has occurred to a person or their property. Therefore, it should be allowed according to the harm principle. The same argument can also be used for so-called incitements to violence. So if somebody just says something, oh, I'm going to do X, Y, Z to you, that isn't a criminal offence, because no physical harm has actually occurred. And, you know, if somebody says, oh, person A should, you know, beat up person C, so you've got three people, A, B, and C, right? So A says B should beat up C. A hasn't committed a criminal offence. If B decides to beat up C, then it's B who gets prosecuted. Because we're born with free will, you see. Like, you know, somebody can come up with all sorts of kind of like crazy nonsense, say stupid things, but ultimately you're responsible for your own actions, aren't you? So, you know, like somebody could tell me, oh, you should go and like beat up person C. But it's up to me whether I do that or not. It's my decision. It's my choice. People should be allowed to say all sorts of crazy, objectionable things because it doesn't break the harm principle. And the other thing that I would say, just, you know, to round things up, is that, yeah, some people won't like this at all. They won't like freedom of speech. They won't. But the alternative is even worse. And the alternative is a police state. If you allow politicians the power to decide what people can and can't say, you're actually not living in a free society. You're living in a dictatorship. And it's the first thing historically that's always happened in any totalitarian takeover, which is the criminalisation of speech that the state subjectively disapproves of. And yeah, what I'm saying is that you won't defeat, as a fish there, you won't defeat Starmer's police state until you actually address the main issue, which is these odious hate speech laws. They have to go. Nothing happens until they go. And I suppose one other thing as well, just to preempt comments from some of the kind of Nazi lovers, is do I believe that people should say that Hitler was the best thing? Hitler's police state was fantastic. Something else, yeah. Oh yeah, the Holocaust never happened. Should people be allowed to say those things? I believe so, yes, I think they should. I might find it deeply objectionable, but I believe that people should be allowed to say those things. So then the argument will be, well, why don't you allow those comments on your channel? For the simple reason, we need to address the problems in order. So until we have free speech, there can be no open dialogue. It should be obvious, really. So we need to focus on that first. Yeah, the other thing that I was going to say as well is that Starmer really can't do anything to stop you talking about John Stuart Mill's harm principle and the importance of free speech. So, talk about it. As I said lots and lots of times already, nothing changes in Britain until the hate speech laws go. So we need to vigorously make the arguments in favour of free speech, complete, unfettered free speech. Oh yeah, these are one other thing as well. When I was at school, the PC authoritarians absolutely hated me teaching the harm principle and arguments in favour of free speech to young people. They tried to shut me down on numerous occasions. So yeah, that just shows you that the type of people that favour these hate speech laws are what I call PC, politically correct authoritarians. So yes, that's all I want to say today. So God bless.